Hello, I'm Poppy, a social sciences student going into my third year, and welcome to an alternative guide to the Glamorgan Building. This is an emotion-led audio tour that focuses on how users of the building feel about the space. Using data from interviews with staff and students that I conducted during my 2024 summer internship, notable places and emotions associated with them will be discussed. This project was funded by the Learning and Teaching Academy and supervised by Agatha Herman in the School of Geography and Planning and Esther Muddiman in the School of Social Sciences. The tour should last about 40 to 45 minutes, but feel free to pause and resume it at your own pace. So let's go, if you aren't already here, to the front of the building, and we'll begin. You are outside the building. Some words used to describe it by visitors at a recent open day and the interviewees were status, legitimacy, grandeur, intimidating, imperial, money. Take a look around. What strikes you about it? The pillars, the white Portland stone, its neoclassical look? It was built in 1912 for the Glamorgan County Council, as engraved near the top. Glamorgan County Council was established around the same time as the University College in Cardiff and was active from 1889 to 1974, when it was replaced by three separate smaller council areas, South, Mid and West Glamorgan. The building was acquired by the university in 1997 and houses the School of Social Sciences and the School of Geography and Planning. How you feel about this building may shift depending on your lived experiences and memories. For example, interviewees who describe themselves as working class were more likely to say that they were unused to this kind of building and felt intimidated by it, or questioned whether or not they were entitled to be there. Look around again. Are there things which you have just noticed? It is easy to walk past a familiar space, not noticing things or knowing their history. Many of the staff and students that I interviewed said that their perceptions of the building changed once they learnt about some of its history. For example, the two large classical Greek statues at the front of the building are a deliberate show of status and power. The one on our right, as we look up at the building, depicts Neptune and symbolises navigation. The one on our left depicts Minerva and represents industrialisation, and more specifically, coal mining. The profits from mining iron and coal brought much wealth and shaped the whole development of Cardiff and the wider county. However, the men straining to push and pull the heavy mining cart to the rear of the statue are a reminder that the people who worked hard on the land were not those who profited. These figures might prompt us to think about the harsh conditions and struggles of workers. Before we move into the building, let's remember the picket lines created here by staff over the years during industrial disputes. These occasions brought people together under a common cause, and its memories have stuck with many members of the building. One interviewee reflected on meeting people from roles and offices which they wouldn't have spoken to otherwise.
It was felt quite an equal footing because of that collectivity, and quite symbolic that we were trying to create the picket line in front of this big grand set of steps.
If you would like to pause the audio guide now and have a further look around, please do. Otherwise, let's make our way inside. Walk forward through the revolving door into the foyer. If you have mobility issues or need step-free access, unfortunately, you will need to enter through the 24-hour door, which is located to the left of the building down a narrow path. This side entrance has a very different feel to the grand approach at the front of the building, and it is very clear that the architects Harris and Moody did not think about people with different mobility needs visiting the building. The side entrance, part of an extension built in the 1930s, definitely feels like an afterthought. If you are entering through the 24-hour door, go forward until you can see a corridor on your right, with a lift that will take you to the ground floor, where you can make your way to the building foyer. If you're heading this way, please pause the audio guide until you're there, and feel free to rewind to hear those instructions again. You will have found yourself in the building's foyer, lit by yellow pendant lights with red carpet and brass stair rails. On your left is a picture of the late Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip, who officially opened the building. Think about what this evokes for you, if anything. Some people that I interviewed reflected that the photograph seems very dated and doesn't necessarily connect with the people who use the building today. Others saw the image as divisive and out of place in a building hosting two university departments that often challenge forms of power. One mentioned that the framed photo was stolen at a staff Christmas party years back and found in the toilets. If you're ready to have a look around at the other artefacts, on your right you'll find a bronze plaque commemorating council members who fought in the First World War. This military imaging echoes the military memorial events which have taken place in the building and across the road in Alexandra Gardens, home to the Welsh National War Memorial. Although for some people the military memorial and an image of monarchy might evoke pride, belonging and a sense of patriotism, others might feel less comfortable. Irish staff and students, for example, may relate to the British monarchy and military in terms of the colonisation and control of Ireland, leading to famine and the death or emigration of over 2 million people during the 19th century. Artefacts collectively create and naturalise specific themes such as nationalism and the military. See if you can spot any other nods to the military in the foyer. It is important to note, whilst you reflect today, that the building is Grade 1 listed, which makes it hard to make alterations to the structure and surfaces of the building. However, this also means that a lot of what we see today has remained unchanged for over 100 years and provides an insight into how people interacted in the space from the early 1900s onwards. Head straight into the building when you're ready. On your left and right, you will see the gentlemen's and ladies' toilets. If you have never been inside of them before, you can take mine and my interviewee's word for it, but they are almost comical, but fascinating. They have helped the building maintain its historical touch, for example by having large Edwardian coat hooks. The terrazzo tiling in the toilets even gets a special mention in Cadw's Grade 1 listing report of the building. However, interviewees noted that the toilets are quite impractical. They take up a lot of space for just one cubicle. Thankfully, there are more toilets on this floor, including gender-neutral accessible toilets that do not require walking up and down steps. We will now head to the left and follow the corridor towards the council chamber on the right. Do you recognise this corridor at all from any TV programmes? The Glamorgan Building has features in episodes of Sherlock, Holby City and Doctor Who. In the Boomtown episode from 2005 of Doctor Who, Welsh actress Marley Harris narrowly avoids being eaten by an alien in the ladies' toilet here. Go slowly through this corridor, noticing the transparent display cases on the walls. These displays are refreshed regularly, creating liveliness and a sense of what is going on in the building. For a long time, these walls were bare, before a way to suspend the displays without damaging the stonework was organised. The people I spoke to generally agreed that these displays make the building more welcoming. As one participant remarked,
"There's been some quite, particularly thinking about social sciences, some like social justice-related exhibitions, and I think it is an important space for communicating that."
The first exhibition to be mounted in this space was called Inside Out and opened in October 2022. It showcased photographs taken by brothers Simon and Anthony Campbell of Cardiff's Butte Town and Tiger Bay area from the 1970s to 1990s. The photographs celebrate spirit of the communities living through immense change, depicting friends, families, and local characters. The exhibition is remembered by my interview participants as a celebration of diversity, which is something people feel should be a more permanent aspect of the building, as the current imagery in the building is almost all of white men of wealth and status. How do you think this impacts people's sense of belonging when they spend time in the building? Are there any groups or individuals that you think might feel unrepresented or unrecognised in the building? You could also have a think about what you would put in these display cases. We are now going to make our way into the council chamber on your right. After you walk in, it might be a good time to pause the tour and reflect. Otherwise, I will move on to talking about the room. Some words that interviewees use to describe this space are authoritative, European, beautiful, unique, inaccessible. Originally, the room was used for official council meetings, with the biggest and most ornately carved wooden seats reserved for the most senior figures. Now the room is used for conferences, lectures, and events. Take a look around at the wide chairs, tall dome ceiling. Little has changed in here since the building first opened. There are two more huge statues by Albert Hodge depicting a poet and a bard. Further up towards the dome ceiling, there is some Greek and Egyptian imagery of sphinxes and armoured torsos. The room has been hailed as impractical because of its acoustic and access problems, but many interviewees said that the architecture does add to the beautiful, engaging sense of the building. Directly above the projector screen, there is a painting called The Quest of St. George. St. George is the patron saint of England, and some colonial interpretations suggest he is slaying the Welsh dragon. How do you feel about the Saint of England being a central part of the room? Are you surprised to see this in a Welsh council building? The legacy of British colonialism creates complex feelings about these kinds of proud, grand spaces that were funded and built at a time when British and Welsh industrialists were making their fortunes by exploiting people and resources overseas. Some participants reported feeling uncomfortable in this space. Listening to their reflections helped me to move away from the idea that we all ought to feel a certain way about this space. Instead, it is important to amplify the voices of those who feel excluded within the building. Look down. I will give you some time now to spot the quote on the wooden stand at the front centre of the room.
To thine own self be true, and it must follow, as the night the day thou canst not then be false to any man.
This is a quote from the Shakespeare play Hamlet, originally meaning putting your best interests first, then taking care of others, but in a contemporary context, it can be read as a general statement of commitment to truth. Perhaps the word man stuck out at you. Perhaps it feels sexist. We will talk more about gender dimensions in our next location. Please take your time moving on from the council chamber and into the committee rooms. When you exit out of the same door you came in, they are to the right. Welcome to Committee Room 1. Committee Room 2 can be accessed through the sliding oak doors, which may be open or closed at the time of your visit. Take a moment to take in the bright red and orange carpet, the two oversized stone fireplaces at either end, the row of glass double doors leading out onto the balcony, the velvet curtains, and the oak panelling. If you look up, you will see some ornate plasterwork depicting a seascape with golden shells and crabs. We think this is a continuation of the theme of navigation that we touched upon outside the building. The committee rooms are a popular location for a range of different university events and for hosting external speakers. For some events, the grand atmosphere of the committee rooms is fitting. However, when organisers are trying to create a more informal, comfortable or social atmosphere, they have to think carefully about how to work with the way the room is decorated. Let's look at an example. I want you to focus on the many portraits on the walls. What do you notice? There are 8 portraits and 2 bronze busts in the committee room. All but one of them depict men, all of them white. Esther and Agatha's archival research indicates that most of the figures depicted here were wealthy industrialists and council members. These oil paintings are likely to have been retirement gifts to members of the Glamorgan County Council, or in some cases, men would leave money to the council or university college in their will, on the condition that a portrait to commemorate them was hung. What do you think about the idea of buying your place on the walls of the committee rooms? Is this something you would gather from looking at these paintings? When I asked participants this, they said no, and that it is important to be transparent about who people are and what they represent. Please head up to those doors in the middle of the 2 rooms. What do you see as the handles? Carved into the oak sliding doors are 2 naked women that apparently symbolise the core values of the council, liberty and justice. A couple of interviewees highlighted the point that you had to touch these carvings each time you open and close the doors, but agreed that it is not too strange given the historical context and the popularity of female nudes in 19th century art. These 2 representations of women are juxtaposed with the much larger and robust depictions of the men in the portraits in the committee rooms. This contrast certainly gives the sense that this was designed as a masculine space. Glamorgan County Council ran for 36 years before the first woman councillor, Florence Rose Davis, was elected in 1925. More recently, a portrait of Dame Theresa Rees, a professor and Equalities Commissioner who also served as a Pro-Vice Chancellor at the university, has been added to the male portraits. This was seen by participants as a step forward. As you enter Committee Room 1 and walk towards the middle of the room, this photo portrait is on the left wall. Alongside this has been a general increased representation of women within the schools. You might want to reflect on this picture and how it is the only one of a woman inside the committee rooms now, before I move on. Ethnicity was also a talking point for interviewees while we were in this room. There is just one person of colour depicted in the paintings in these rooms. As you enter Committee Room 1, you'll find him in the middle of the right-hand wall, towards the bottom left-hand corner of the painting titled Banquet Given by Marylebone Reformers. This man, Dwarkanath Tagore, a Bengal Brahmin, is dressed in red, in stark comparison to the black and white of the suited men around him, and wears a green turban. You might know of his grandson, Rabindranath Tagore, a famous poet and literary figure. Back to the older Tagore in this painting. He helped to found an Anglo-Indian agency that ran coal mines and tea plantations. His company was also engaged in the opium trade with China as a proxy for the East India Company. Despite the long list of names in the plaque underneath the painting, including prominent Welsh politicians and businessmen, Tagore is not named. This painting therefore provides some different prompts for thinking about the complex role of Wales in the world from the 1880s onwards, and how the men walking the corridors of this building and travelling to London would have been making decisions and trade agreements that had impacts beyond Cardiff and Wales. Speaking of impactful decisions, did you know that former First Minister of Wales, Mark Drakeford, worked in Stockside for almost 20 years? He was a professor of social policy when he was appointed as a Welsh Government Minister in 2013. Former leader of Plaid Cymru, Leanne Woods, also lectured in social policy in the school between 2000 and 2003. Thus, the building maintains its links to powerful decision makers.
I think it is just you don't feel represented. You kind of do feel like you're battling against, which is true in academia. You are still battling against this history of masculine dominance.
Oh, I don't see very many things that represent me. And so, yeah, I do kind of feel like, do I fit in? Am I in the right place?
These extracts from the interviews show how important our physical environment is for our sense of belonging and how important it is to have inclusive spaces. It is almost time to leave the committee rooms, so pause the audio guide if you'd like to, and play it when you're ready to move on. Exit the committee rooms the way that you came in. You will be able to see a sign on your right which navigates you around the building. All interviewees told me how difficult it is to know your way around. However, you do become more familiar with the building over time. Familiarity has a large effect on your sense of belonging in the building, so it is not too difficult to see how your role, how secure your contract is, and how senior you are can all alter how comfortable you are moving around the building. On the sign, you will also see a divide between social sciences and geography and planning, which creates mixed feelings from both sides. Participants from geography generally suggested they should be better represented in the building, maybe through signage or different workspaces. On your left, you will see a broken lift. Participants recall that it has been broken for years and is too old for the university to acquire the parts needed to fix it, despite this not being mentioned on the sign. This brings us back to the idea of accessibility. Overall, people suggested that the building has some way to go. The complexity of the building layout, coupled with at least one of the 3 lifts being out of order, means that the building is not easy for disabled people or those with mobility issues to navigate efficiently. The fact that the building is listed means there are restrictions on alterations that can be made, and we are left with a building that was never designed for teaching and learning purposes and did not take into account issues of accessibility, particularly when intersected with race. Interestingly, archival records show that there were problems with the lifts in the early days of the building, when the lift shafts frequently flooded and eroded the cables and pulleys that operated the lifts. If you were to walk up the stairs next to the lift, you would be greeted by a sign saying "No teaching rooms on this floor." These signs have been put up, presumably, to help students navigate the building, as all of the teaching spaces in the older North building are on the ground or lower ground floor. There are some teaching rooms upstairs in the newer south side of the building, but these are accessed by a different staircase, adding to the confusion. Interviewees mentioned that these signs feel quite intimidating and highlight a divide between students and staff. This isn't to say that the divide is total. Some students that I spoke with said that they had strong relationships with some staff, while others said there is a tendency for both parties to shut themselves off from one another. By combining staff and student perspectives and experiences of the building, I hope that this tour helps you to reflect on how students and staff can work together and what you might do to help the space become more welcoming and inclusive. Walk down the hallway to the left of the lift until you reach an open door, the staff room. It is clear from the interviews that people feel it is important to have spaces where you can pop in, rest and be social, particularly post-COVID as the building feels quieter. It can be difficult to know who is working around you, especially in this building which is organised across many floors and corridors, with many people working in individual offices, often with doors closed. This is perhaps to keep the heat in or draft out, as lots of warmth escapes through the single glazed windows. The people I spoke with suggested that these informal spaces can compensate for any downfalls of the building's architecture. This makes sense, as community is key in creating feelings of belonging and positive well-being. People make a place. Therefore, little spaces like the staff room are seen as positive features of the building. The space is small, but nice, with a kitchenette and a temperamental coffee machine. Unfortunately, the kitchen space is too narrow for wheelchair users, so they cannot fully access this communal space. We are moving away from the parts of the building that look much the same as they did when the building opened in 1912, towards those that have been modernised and upgraded. Which spaces do you prefer? Whilst you reflect, we will move out of the room and continue down the corridor towards the room labelled Socksai Study Space. Users of the building think this space is incredibly useful, with technology, the computers to your right, and inclusive signs on the walls welcoming people of all communities and religions. These are key attempts made by the equality, diversity and inclusion teams here in the building to increase senses of belonging. Also, students will like to know that in the bottom left corner there are books to take away that have been recommended by staff. Once you've gotten to grips with what you can see, head over to the top left corner and take a look at the wall of Socksai staff pictures. This is very valuable for recognising the teaching and learning community. It also provides an opportunity to reflect on the demographics of our staff. Due to the lack of representation of people of colour within the university, one participant said powerfully,
"The impression I get is it doesn't matter how hard I'm going to try to focus on my education and focus on becoming something, I just won't make it up onto the wall."
This suggests that much more can and should be done to tackle systematic inequalities both inside and beyond the university. Interestingly, many participants who record feelings of initial discomfort and exclusion due to the building's and institution's representation stress the importance of its social side and the feeling of being a part of a school, connecting with particular individuals, and how important these social connections are in creating a sense of welcome and belonging. This tells us that it is especially important for people working and studying in this building to help make new people feel welcome, when the building itself might not feel warm and inviting. When you are ready, let's head back down the corridor. This corridor connects the old and new parts of the building. We have been in the original northern part of the building, and we are now moving to Glamorgan South, an extension built in the 1930s to accommodate the growth of the council. There is a bronze plaque commemorating the opening of the newer part of the building on your left after the vending machine and before you reach the top of the stairs. Keep going past the stairs and follow the signs for the coffee shop, turning right down the corridor and then left into the cafe itself. I asked what people's favourite place in the building was. Many of them said the coffee shop, whether this is down to the coffee or not. The space is filled with places to sit, booths on the left and living walls on the back, filled with moss. This is one attempt to increase liveliness and eco-friendliness within the building. This is positive, as we can recognise that the environment around us is also part of the building's history, so there is good reason for us to protect and reflect this too. The coffee shop, frequented by staff and students, particularly between lectures, is nicely decorated and homely. It has been hailed as a space to look after one another, and one which belongs to everyone, which feels incredibly important. Through the interviews, I know it is key in keeping students at the university between lectures, which from what we've learnt so far, allows you to feel more familiar with the building. Overall, the coffee shop's modern interior and lively atmosphere contrasts with the grand ground floor rooms that we have explored so far. The people I interviewed suggested that this is positive as it creates balance within the building. Do you get a different sense walking into these social spaces compared to the locations at the beginning of the tour? We are now going to move on to discuss the staff offices, so exit the coffee shop in your own time, retrace your steps, and you can either take the lift to the first floor or walk a few steps further to the stairs up to the Geography and Planning department. As you walk up the stairs, you will be greeted by a mural on the wall welcoming you to the School of Geography and Planning. Wait wherever you'd like whilst I introduce our next focus. How do you feel about this space? How does the entrance to this school compare to the main entrance to the building? Make your way now through the corridor to your right, if you took the stairs. If you took the lift, you need to go through the double doors on your left, and left again through a second set of doors. On your left, you will spot painted flower pots on the windowsill, created by the Geography department. Many participants agree art is a nice way to make the building, including these long white corridors, more welcoming. The staff working along these corridors that I spoke to appreciated their offices, their own space bringing comfort, a sense of legitimacy and pride, feelings that they felt alongside the acknowledgement of the building's problematic roots. Walking along the corridor now. Is it quiet and empty, or busy and bustling? How does the weather outside impact the feel of the space inside? Lastly, can you see the sign saying bilingual posters only on the wallboards? Are there Welsh translations on every board? The idea of creating a stronger sense of Welsh identity and presence within the building is something which many interviewees stressed. For example, when asked about the Welsh identity of the building, one person replied,
"Yeah, so there's definitely kind of a lack of a Welsh identity. It feels kind of a strong kind of colonial British Empire feeling to the building. And yeah, there doesn't seem to be a great deal in terms of kind of a specific sense of Welshness or kind of any other kind of identity, I think, other than kind of British upper class identity."
We will now discuss the final location, the lower ground floor of the Old North building. This is accessed separately to the south side, where you can find the 24-hour door, lecture and seminar rooms. To find it, retrace your path to the broken lift and head down the stairs. For step-free access, head back to the foyer, through the corridor that wraps around the council chamber, and use the lift to the left. Press the B button. Feel free to listen to this final section of the audio guide somewhere else if you don't want to access this lower ground floor. The lower ground floor, also referred to as the basement, is painted yellow and green. And if you walk through the corridor on your right, you will spot pipes, carbon dioxide canisters and vaults. Some words which have been used to describe this space have been weird, creepy, fun, interesting, and it seems to be overall an enjoyable space. It is also one which preserves its history, creating a sense that you are perhaps stepping back in time. This part of the building held the Records Office, now the Glamorgan Archives, from the 1930s. Archivists battled with flooding in this area and damage to documents before 2010, when their new purpose-built facility was opened next to Cardiff City Stadium. 2 rooms down here have been converted for small group teaching, whilst the rest of the space accommodates PhD students from geography and planning. The physical organisation of the space can impact or reflect its social organisation. In this building, students are concentrated mostly on the ground and lower floors, where the teaching rooms are. Professional services and student support staff are predominantly on the ground floor, while academic staff are mainly located on the 1st and 2nd floors. What should we make of the geography and planning PhD students being located in the basement? Well, in my interviews, I found that many PhD students have made their position into a joke, calling themselves the basement dwellers. Until recently, Sockside PhD students have been located in a separate building on Museum Place, so have been physically disconnected from other staff and students in the school. Some office space for PhD students is now being created on the ground floor and 3rd floor of the Glamorgan Building. It will be interesting to see how this impacts students' sense of belonging. I will let you have a look around the basement and recognise that the building does have little gems. Funny, nice or weird, or all 3 places which interviewees just loved to talk about. When you are ready, we will conclude the audio tour. Feel free to walk back to wherever you would like to. I recommend pausing the audio guide until you are ready to hear the conclusions. So, as we conclude our tour, what have we learnt? We've learned that everyone has different and intersectional journeys which affect their sense of belonging in the building. The architecture is grand, interesting, and for some people beautiful, but it may not represent the people studying and working in the space today. The historical shape of the building frames how we consciously or unconsciously think about who is most valued and welcomed in the space. A theme that came through strongly in my walking interviews with people who spend time in the building is that it is the people who create community and a sense of belonging, and that it is these interactions and connections that help to foster a warm and welcoming atmosphere, despite the sometimes haughty or off-putting demeanour of the building. The next steps of our project are to carry on conversations about the building, asking more questions about who was depicted and celebrated in the artwork on the walls, and to invite people to think about what other artwork or imagery might better reflect the values that we want to share. The project team, Dr Agatha Herman, Senior Lecturer in the School of Geography and Planning, and Dr Esther Muddiman, Lecturer in the School of Social Sciences, are continuing with this research in conversation with Professor Mara Miel and Professor Sally Holland, who are leading on EDI issues in Joppal and Sockside, respectively. If you would like to know more about the history of the building, sign up for future tours and events, or share your own reflections on the Glamorgan Building, please contact Esther or Agatha via email. I personally have really enjoyed being on this project. My motivations to take part came from wanting to be a part of a research environment and make a difference in the building. I have learned that this is possible, and a big step in getting there is listening to the people who use it, especially those who feel that they don't fit the narrative being portrayed on its walls. Whilst I knew people would have different things to say, I was surprised to hear how many different journeys exist in the building. I hope you've enjoyed learning about Glamorgan, And thank you so much to the staff and students that I interviewed for this project. Goodbye.